We begin by saying that the Canadian Prime Minister, who tried to advise us on how to deal with the farmers' protests last year and swore that Canada will be there to defend the rights of peaceful protest, has run away from the truckers and others, even as we speak on the 30th of January 2022. They are rallying against vaccine mandates, inflation, supply chain disruptions, etc. So the fellow who was trying to give us advice has actually gone into hiding. He has betrayed their trust. The saddest thing about betrayal is that it never comes from your enemies. It comes from those you have faith in. Some of the most poisonous people come disguised as friends and family. My motto has always been to protect the oppressed, even if he is my enemy. But I will never forgive the traitor, even if he is my friend.
It goes out to all the Canadians, especially the Canadian truckers. I am so very proud of you. I applaud your bravery and your determination to stand up for freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. You have given hope to so many people in the world. You have shown the world that this small fringe minority is not all that small after all. More importantly, you demonstrated how to deal with an ever-increasing governmental overreach. This is not something you put up with. No, this is something you need to shut down. If you were really an insignificant, small, fringe minority, I wonder why Prime Minister Trudeau considered it necessary to flee to an undisclosed location and remain there in hiding. Apparently, he is afraid of the people, and so he should be. Because if the government is afraid of the people, that is what you call democracy. If the people are afraid of government, however, that's what you call a tyranny. Dear Canadians, do not give up. You are on the right path, and many people around the world are with you in their thoughts and wishes. I wish you the greatest possible success. Your bravery and determination to stand up for freedom, democracy, and the rule of law has inspired others to stand up to their governments as well. There have been numerous announcements of organizing freedom convoys all over the world. On Monday, February 7th, the European Convoy for Freedom is scheduled to arrive in Brussels, the capital of lunacy, the origin of this whole digital green certificate madness and all the harassment, discrimination, and oppressive measures that came with it. I hope they will arrive in large numbers, and I will be among those lining the streets, welcoming and cheering the desperately needed delivery of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law.
And what the Prime Minister of Canada, the way he's behaving right now, he's exactly like a tyrant, like a dictator. He's like Ceausescu in Romania. If even you doubt, if you raise doubts about the vaccines, you're outcasted. What's the difference between what he does and what happened under the Inquisition? See, on one side they say, well, we should not believe in God, but on the other side they say, believe in science. We don't have to. Science is not about belief. Science is about measurements, conclusions, hypotheses, and arguments. We got to a point right now where even if you say something, if you raise any doubts, you're already considered, as whatever, they label you in very different ways. This is not okay. And I have to tell you, that when I saw the protests in Canada, the way the truckers over there reacted, I got in touch with some of them, others contacted me, I congratulated them, and I want to use this opportunity to thank them. And I hope this movement for freedom and for rights is spreading all around the world. Because at the end of the day, we have to make sure that all these elected officials, they understand that they were elected in those offices to work for the people, not to behave like masters of slaves. Thank you.
based on Article 195, out that it would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
Poštovane kolege, dragi građani, premijeru Trudeau. Sloboda, pravo izbora, pravo na život i zdravlje, pravo na rad za mnoge od nas, to su temeljna ljudska prava za koje su milijuni građana Europe i svijeta položili svoje živote. Za obranu naših prava i prava naše djece, koje smo stjecali stoljećima, mnogi od nas, uključujući i mene, spremni smo riskirati vlastitu slobodu i položiti vlastite živote. Nažalost, danas su među nama i oni koji gaze te temeljne vrijednosti. Kanada, nekada simbol modernog svijeta, je pod vodstvom vaše kvazi liberalne čizme proteklih mjeseci postala simbol kršenja temeljnih ljudskih prava i građanskih sloboda. Gledali smo kako konjima gaze žene, kako samohranim roditeljima blokirate bankovne račune, da ne mogu platiti djeci školovanje, da ne mogu platiti lijekove, da ne mogu platiti račune za struju i vodu, da ne mogu platiti rate kredita za svoje domove. Za vas su to možda liberalne metode. Međutim, za mnoge građane svijeta to je diktatura najgore vrste. Budite uvjereni da građani svijeta, udruženi, mogu zaustaviti svaki režim koji želi uništiti slobodu građana, bilo bombama, bilo štetnim farmaceutskim proizvodima. Hvala.
European democratic values that underpin all of our actions. I worked in Syria and Pakistan for many years as a diplomat and therefore value democracy very highly. Now, the invitation to Canadian PM Justin Trudeau is an invitation to someone who's been trampling on democratic rights, who's been cracking down on people who protested against disproportionate corona measures, peoples who were supporting a non-sanctioned movement coming under criticism. So clearly the values of democracy being despised by this individual. Let us not give someone like this any speaking time in this House of Democracy.
Now, Ms. Garcia Perez.
At the forefront of speaking up for those who have been oppressed. We recognise the interconnectivity of the countries of Europe and the world at large, and that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We've had calls in this House to address serious human rights abuses occurring in all places over the world, from China in the east to here in the west, and addressing the issues in our own country as well. So I find it odd that we've heard nothing of what has been a well-publicised, high-profile, peaceful protest being violently suppressed and dispersed by armed government forces. Ranks of uniformed and armoured military figures, stripped of their badges and ID tags, converged on protesters. An officer on horseback trampled over a disabled woman. Around 200 arrests were made and over 60 vehicles seized by the state. It sounds like something you'd see from Russia, or actions which we'd condemn in Hungary or Poland, but instead it is happening in the supposedly liberal democracy of Canada, and so no condemnation has been forthcoming. In order to legally permit this level of force, Prime Minister Trudeau invoked the Emergency Act of 1988, the first time this act has ever been used since it replaced the War Measure Act of 1914. And not being satisfied with merely dispersing protesters, the state froze the finances associated with certain individuals and companies believed to be involved in the protests. These are people who committed no crime, who has been not convicted lawfully in court, and who the government decided to punish anyway, because they might have been connected with a protest which was inconvenient to the government. It was an unprecedented act by the state against its citizens, which should be roundly condemned. And so, Leader, I'm asking you to write to the Canadian Ambassador, Nancy Smith, and condemn the excessive force used by the government on the overreach that is happening there to its citizens. Authoritarianism is a threat to democracy, no matter whose foot the boot is on.